Well, let's head to Norwich, where we can speak to Dr. Sherian Banuri, a behavioural economist at the University of East Anglia. Great to have you on the programme this morning. So, stay alert, not stay at home. The government wanting to shift emphasis to going back to work. How hard is that going to be when that message to stay at home has really been drummed into us?
I think actually that's going to be quite easy to do, to be honest, because for a lot of us, we've been in our homes, we've been sheltering in place, but this sort of call to return to normalcy is so strong within us that we'd want to return back to normal circumstances and do whatever we can to get there. On top of that, we all have, or most of us anyway, have this inherent optimism. We call that optimism bias, that makes us believe that we're less likely to get the virus, and that will spur on our incentive to take these things quite casually.
But we do need clear messaging now more than ever, don't we? And on the one hand, the government seems to be saying, we do still want you to stay at home. But on the other hand, they're not saying that. They're saying stay alert. But what does that actually mean? It seems quite vague and ambiguous.
Yes, indeed. And that's precisely the problem. We need a lot more clarity on what that means precisely. Essentially, what I think they want it to mean is that you need to take extreme precautions, but start moving back to some sense of normalcy. But it requires things like telling us exactly what, let's say, this level 5 system means, right? So if it's a level 4, does that mean we stay at home? If it's level 3, does that mean we can go down to the end of the street, or can we drive? So each of these levels need to be associated with very clear guidelines that need to be communicated effectively in order for them to have any sort of effect.
Behavioural scientists at the beginning of the lockdown talked a lot about fatigue, not bringing in the lockdown too soon, because ultimately people will get tired of it and the rules will start to slip. Now, over the bank holiday weekend, we saw that happening quite a lot, with people going out and sitting in parks and whatever, flouting those guidelines and rules. Do you believe that fatigue has now begun to set in?
I wouldn't quite put it that way. I wouldn't quite put it in the way of in the sense of fatigue. But I would say that, again, this comes back to optimism and our sort of perceptions of risk. So the longer we stay in lockdown, the longer we sort of remain healthy, the more we think that we're not necessarily immune, but the probability of us catching it because of our own specific behaviors is lower than what it actually might be. And so what you would see is people starting to flout the rules, be a little bit more casual. We've noticed this very much around Norwich, and I think that's around the country as well. And so it's not so much fatigue as it is, there's no real evidence for a lot of people who've been healthy that this is very serious, and the only evidence that needs to come is from the authority. That message needs to be reinforced.
We hear that we're going to get some sort of roadmap tonight from the Prime Minister. Hope is part of the human condition, isn't it? And having something to cling on to. How important is it going to be for Boris Johnson to give us a timetable, to set out steps of when things may be released, when parts of our old life can return?
I think it's actually quite critical for Boris Johnson to give us a timetable, because it's important for us to understand, different stages and things at which we will start to return back. Because the concern always is that without this sort of foresight and this timetabling, you would very quickly see people flouting the rules, right? Just like we see. I mean, that's one way that we deal with uncertainty, and so it's very important for us to have some of that uncertainty alleviated. with the appropriate caveats, of course. I mean, no, Boris Johnson can't predict the future, but to give us sort of clear steps as to here's the path forward, and if it meets these tests, then we're going to engage in these activities.
Well, we should see what that timetable looks like at 7 o'clock this evening. Dr. Shehryar Banouri from the University of East Anglia, thank you.
Thank you very much.